Wow. So do you think you're looking at some Egyptian artifacts here? Is that what you think you're looking at? Where is this from? What is this? Let's zoom in a little bit. These are statuettes found in San Salvador. This is from El Salvador. Have we here an archaic Egyptian style? Say what? Some of you may be familiar with these artifacts, especially if you've seen my video, Osiris and Isis statues in America, Acajutla, that's in El Salvador, Toltec chief Palenque, Egypt to marry in America. Go ahead and check out the video. We've actually gone over those statues. Just wanted to show you guys, before we read this book today, they're also mentioned in the statues. And they're asking you, have we here an archaic Egyptian style? Where is ancient Egypt? We've been already going over the information a lot. We are in ancient Egypt. It is in America. Shout out to UBTV. And we're reading the book, The Shadow of Atlantis by Colonel A. Breguin. Alright? The Shadow of Atlantis. This is from 1940. Alright, so I'm in chapter 1 of this book. It says here, until comparatively recent days, serious academical science has absolutely disregarded the legends concerning Atlantis. Alright? So we're going to actually be belly flopping through a lot of this book because it's a lot of chapters, a lot of good info, and a lot of repetitive info that we've already read about the stories of how they got the story of Atlantis from Plato and, from ancient Egypt and all that. So we know all this stuff right here. We're going to get to the really good juicy parts right here. It now appears that Plato and other ancient writers were probably right when they treated as facts the misty legends which circulated in their time among the Mediterranean's people. Just to remind everybody, and this part is letting us know again that Plato was very clear that Atlantis was larger than North Africa, Libya, right? So it's not just there. It's not there because it's bigger than that. And Asia Minor together. Therefore, the dimensions of Atlantis, as given by the Greek philosophers, seem to us rather an understatement. In our opinion, Atlantis must have been a real continent, like Australia or Greenland, right? A real continent. According to the famous naturalist Buffon, the narrative of Plato does not contain anything improbable. Perhaps, says Buffon, America was once connected by a comparatively narrow strip of land with the Azores group and Ireland. I definitely do think something like that was going on, where the British Isles was more connected to the Americas at some point, even if it was Newfoundland. We find the proofs of this assertion in the following fact: the remains of certain fossil animals and shells peculiar to America have been discovered also in Ireland, but nowhere else in Europe. Okay, nowhere else in Europe but in Ireland. And this, Buffon's opinion, agrees with the work of the scientist Lemaitre, published at the end of the 18th century. Alright, so like I'm saying, yes, parts of Atlantis did sink, but a lot of the other parts are still here. We're talking about America. America. As I stated before, many facts mentioned in this book lead to the belief that during some remote epoch, somewhere on the Earth's surface, there lived a race which developed a high and even refined culture. The geographical boundaries of this culture can be outlined as only conjecturally: on the north, the latitude of Brittany; on the west, the meridian of Guatemala City in Central America; in the south, the parallel of the ruins of Tijuanaco in Bolivia; and on the east, the meridian of Cairo in Egypt. But where is Egypt really, ancient Egypt? It was still here in America, you see? All those three places were here. And Brittany, he just said, might have been connected more to America. But I think that certain information concerning the mysterious prehistoric culture in Central and South America allow us to conclude that the refinement of that culture was due to Atlantean influences. The great age of the former permits us to admit the great age of the latter. It seems that the Atlantean culture, who's this Atlantean culture, reached even the shores of northern and northwestern Africa. Alright? It reached, meaning they went over there. It's not original to Africa. They went over there. The famous German archaeologist Leo Frobenius found in the neighborhood of the mouth of the Niger and Yorubaland a bronze statue of the god Olokun, the African Poseidon. Yorubaland was actually the Ufa kingdom, occupying the whole Gold Coast of Guinea. And some authorities believe that Ufa was in the past nothing more than an Atlantean colony, a colony of Atlantis, not the center Africa was not the center, just a colony. It was a world empire. One must remember that Poseidon cult was preponderant in Atlantis and its colonies. Leo Frobenius also found on the Gold Coast marvelous prehistoric monuments belonging to an architecture of an unknown type. Continuing, it says, we are surprised also by the resemblance between some American sacred symbols and the corresponding symbols of the ancient Europeans. We see, for instance, the sign of the swastika, not only on the most ancient Aryan monuments, but also on the prehistoric American ones. All right, we've gone over this. I have a whole video on this. Make sure you guys go check it out if you haven't. A lot of great info, a lot of hidden history. The head of the Gorgon, the symbol of divine knowledge, that was also here. We can meet with not only on the classical monuments, but also in the Mexican ruins and on the inscrutable stone of Chavin, a magnificent relic of the Tiwanaku culture. The so-called false vault of primeval architecture is to be found in the old monuments of Central America, as well as in the Etruscan monuments and in the Cyclopean buildings of prehistoric Greece. Who are the Etruscan people? That's a future video, right? Could they have been coming out of ancient America? Very possible. Lord Kingsborough tells us in his works on ancient Mexico that the Mexicans, the Cherokees, and the Indian tribes of Michoacan and Honduras used in their religious ceremonies a holy ark. All right, a holy ark, like that of the ancient Jews or Hebrews or Israelites, right? And like the Jews, they did not allow anybody, save the priests, to approach or to touch the ark. The religious rituals of these Indians resemble those of the ancient Bretons and the Irish. Do you guys understand? And you know that we got several videos on these exact topics. We have shown primary sources, colonists coming and describing what they're seeing the Indians do in their ceremonies, which resembled a lot of the stuff they read in the Torah. And as well as a lot of the stuff that they saw, the Druids or the ancient Bretons in Europe, as well, as it says here. Where is the true old world? Professor Leo Frobenius has established some resemblances between the mysterious Etruscans and certain Indian tribes. Again, future video. It seems likely that a great deal of ancient European folklore was borrowed by the prehistoric Europeans from certain ancient American races. Did you hear that? I'm going to repeat that again. I'm going to read this part again. It seems likely that a great deal of ancient European folklore, their mythology, was borrowed. All right? It was borrowed. It's not original to them. Was borrowed by prehistoric Europeans from certain ancient American races. The Atlanteans, in this case, serving as a bridge between the Europeans and the Americans. Now, see how he's trying to put Atlanteans only in the Atlantic and not part of America, but he just admitted that there was people in America that the Atlanteans were bridging together with the Europeans. So obviously, who's the Americans then? What is their name? Again, remember, ATL is a Nahuatl word. So as much as they try to separate Atlantis from America, making it only an island, that was just part of the Americas that went down. It was still attached to the Americas. In this respect, the analogies which we find in the legends concerning the world's creation are very interesting. For instance, the Great Flood, as also are the methods of popular occultism employed by the ancient Greeks, Celts, Scandinavians, and Indians, as well as by such ancient Asiatic races as the Sumers, Jews, Phoenicians, and African Egyptians. All right, so that's the hijack with all these tags. The myth of Atlas, Atlan, that giant who supported by his mighty shoulders the entire universe, seems to be a kind of poetical hyperbole, or a symbol of the political and spiritual powers of the Atlanteans. The prehistoric world was once subjugated not only by the Atlanteans' weapons, but also by their cultural superiority. The mythical Quetzalcoatl, Mexican leader and first teacher, was also represented on the ancient Aztec paintings as a giant supporting the universe. All right, so who really is Atlas? Do you guys hear that? He was first represented just like Atlas, Quetzalcoatl, supporting the universe, and he was a giant. So also was the enlightener of the Chibchas, the old Boshika. We already know that Boshika and Quetzalcoatl are the same. It is important to know that according to the ancient Mexican legends, Quetzalcoatl arrived on the upland of Anahuac from the Far East. We can find allusions to the same idea of Atlas in the sculptural remains among the ruins of ancient harbors disseminated along the Brazilian shores and on the islands of the Azores and Canaries. All right, so again, they're trying to put all these people outside of the Americas. Doesn't mean they weren't coming from another part of Americas. Continuing, some prehistoric Mexican hieroglyphics are strikingly similar to the old Egyptian ones and to the so-called diagrams of the legendary Chinese emperor Popol Vuh, which we can see on the oldest Chinese monuments. All right, so again, more correlation. This is the true old world. That's why there's strikingly similar hieroglyphics over here with these old ancient peoples of the old world. How can we explain such a similarity? Is their existence a proof that the writings of Chinese, Egyptians, and prehistoric Americans derive from a common source? Yes, and it's here in America. The Brazilian forests are full of these ideograms and primitive drawings, in particular in the states of Bahia and Piauí. All right, and again, I recommend that you go ahead and check out my video on the ancient civilizations of South America. We're going to be going over more videos like that. Certain book we're reading in that video, so you guys can take a look how they found all these hieroglyphics, Phoenician scripts, Sumerian scripts, all this stuff in the jungles of Brazil. Make sure to check that video out. Again, we got to put all this together, and this is just more correlation, another source telling us, you know, this is real history. This is what they were finding. Again, the Brazilian forests are full of these ideograms and primitive drawings, in particular in the states of Bahia and Piauí. On the Marajo Island in the Amazonic Delta, we see ideograms resembling the old Mexican and Egyptian hieroglyphs, on Popol Vuh diagrams, and on the enigmatical inscriptions of Cyprus. All right, this is all found in Brazil. Humboldt first drew attention to the resemblance between the old Chinese diagrams and certain Mayan hieroglyphics. All right, so now we're going to get into this part and listen to what they're going to say here about the ancient peoples of the Americas. Like we said before, the true old world will contain people with all kinds of shades of complexion, phenotypes. It says here, it seems, however, that this legend makes a mistake in affirming that all Indian tribes once belonged to the same race. The difference of the color of the skin among them is too great. We can find the most diverse shades of pigmentation. While the tribes of Menominees, Dacoits, Sunni, and others are almost white-skinned, they're not white, almost white-skinned, light-skinned, right? The Caddo tribe in Kansas and the Californian Indians, now almost extinct, are very dark. Now remember, we went over the primary sources, the California Indians. Again, another series I have, I believe 3 or 4 parts or that I have on this, the California Indians and how they are being described as, like it says here, very dark complexion. They're even called, you know, like Negroes. You know, they even reference them in these books as so-called Negroes. All right. So, as it says here, the Caddo, Carolina, the Cara does mean dark black. It does. Caddo tribe in Kansas and in the Californian Indians. We can find also tribes with swarthy red, dark red, olive colored. Olive, there's many colors to olive, not just green. There's dark, there's reddish, you know, there's a brown olives. All right, bright yellow. We've seen runaway ads describing so-called Negroes as bright yellow, and bronze-colored skins. All right, do you hear that? Those are all people of color, really. Professor Retzios considers that all primeval dolichocephalic tribes in America are very closely related to the Guanches of the Canary Islands and to the races which inhabit the Atlantic shores of Africa. They're related. Who do they come from, though? And when? From where? What time? All the above mentioned races and the dolichocephalic Caribs possess a red-brown skin, reddish brown, copper colored tribes of America, red brown skin. You remember who you are? It is interesting to mention here that the mysterious tribe of Masinti, portrayed on the ancient Egyptian frescoes, is depicted with the same shade of skin. Moreover, we can occasionally find white Indian tribes in Venezuela and on the peninsula of Darien. All right, we've read of these accounts. The Quiches of Guatemala, all right, the Quiches, Mayas, right, possess a remarkable monument of great antiquity, the famous Codex Popol Vuh, all right, the Popol Vuh by the Quiche Maya, a bequet of leaves. It is their sacred book, and it was discovered in 1854 by Dr. Scherzer. The 4 volumes of this book, written in the tongue of the Quiches, give the history and the mythology of the Mayas. The Popol Vuh asserts that the forefathers of the Quiches came in a very remote epoch from a distant eastern country situated in the ocean. Later on, 3 sons of their king visited this country of their origin and returned to Guatemala with the knowledge of writing. This mysterious eastern country is described by the Codex as true paradise. Whites and Negroes lived there in peace like brothers and spoke the same language, right? According to their translations, right? Further on, the book of Popol Vuh relates that god Huracan became angry with mankind and flooded the earth. All right, now let's read this part right here. Very interesting. It says the fact of the existence of black races among the inhabitants of the lost continent mentioned in the Codex Popol Vuh is of the greatest interest. Hitherto, ethnologists imagined that Negroes appeared in the New World only during our own epoch when they were imported as slaves. All right, so dodge the hijack. We've already proven that wrong. You've been here. But the most recent researchers demonstrate that they first came to America in a period very remote. All right, came from where? Now he's trying to say you came from somewhere else. They're still always trying to put you outside, even anybody being in America, when we already know we got the oldest land, the oldest water, agriculture, the oldest corn, all that, pyramid building, mummies, right here, oldest fossils, right here, mammals came out of here, right here. The Popol Vuh relates that after the Cataclysm befell the former fatherland of the Quiches, one part of its spared population emigrated westward, example to America, and the other westwards, presumably to Europe or to Africa. Perhaps these later immigrants were the forefathers of the Berbers and Tuaregs, but it is not improbable that in the present African black population, the descendants of some Atlantean black-skinned tribes still exist. It says Quatrefages, Le Plongeon, and Bancroft have proved that certain aboriginal Negro tribes inhabited America. Aboriginal inhabited America not so very long ago. Some statues of the Indian gods in Central America possess typical Negro features, and certain prehistoric monuments there undoubtedly represent Negroes. All right, it's not me saying it. Nobody's doing self-hate. They're saying pseudo. This is facts. You can verify everything in this paragraph we're reading right here. This is facts. Undoubtedly, there is artifacts. There are stone structures that represent so-called Negroes. We have, for instance, such statues in Teotihuacan and Palenque, and a gigantic Negro's head carved in a granite near the Mexican volcano of Taxila. I have seen a statue of a Negro in the archaeological collection of Mr. Ernesto Franco in Quito, Ecuador. According to the opinion of local archaeologists, this statue is at least 20,000 years old. Again, 20,000 years old. A statue of a Negro, right? So-called Negro, right? They're saying they found in Ecuador and it's 20,000 years old. Come on now. The autochthonous black races in America were either gradually mixed with the Indian ones or became extinct. Dodge the hijack. But in the very remote time, Negroes or Negroids were numerous in the New World. They were numerous. What happened? Oh, but then you got millions of Africans coming, right? What happened to the so-called black races in America? They were so numerous, right? It is possible, however, that some black individuals were drifted to America by the strong currents existing in the ocean between Africa and the New World. That was the opinion of Quatrefages. That's their opinion because they don't know. They don't know. O'Donnelly proposes the same hypothesis, affirming that plants, animals, and men were probably carried from one continent to another by strong sea currents. Now I'm going to tell you, and if you haven't seen this video, showing you that actually it's easier and there's more currents actually taking you to Europe and Africa from Americas. It's 4 times harder coming the other way back. We got winds in our favor and currents more than they have coming from their other side. All right, so dodge the hijack with all this stuff. They're trying to explain why they finding so-called Negroes here in ancient America, and they can't do it. Once I had the opportunity of living for about a month in Oyapoc, a locality in a lonely situation among the equatorial forests of French Guiana, there I saw many representatives of the local Negro tribe of Saramaccas, which lives all by itself and is ruled by its own chiefs. The Saramaccas are divided into several clans, and each clan possesses a sort of a coat of arms tattooed on the faces of its members. The opinions, all right, listen to this, he said opinions of scientists concerning the origin of the Saramaccas vary, all right, it's just opinions. While some consider these Negroes to be an autochthonous American tribe. That's it, right there. They are from here. Others think that Saramaccas are none else than the progeny of ancient slaves imported into South America, all right? They're talking about the slave trade. No. Who deserted from their masters in the forests of Guyana. What masters? The masters were so-called Negroes too. If you want to talk about colonial times, and who the Sephardic Jews and the Dutch, the so-called Dutch and all these people, these French, right, in French Guiana, who they were. So we got to dodge the hijack with all that. We've already gone over that. We've already debunked the out of Africa theories. Let's not forget all this stuff. We got to chew the meat and spit out the bones when we're reading these books. Remember their cultural background. They're still coming with an out of Africa belief. Literally beliefs, Darwinism and stuff like that. But they're letting you know that there is people that tell you, scientists, right? Scientists, that the Saramaccas are to be an autochthonous American tribe. Now he says, my own view is that the latter hypothesis is wrong. Clearly it would be very difficult to transport into slavery an entire tribe, and still more difficult for that tribe to escape together. You hear what he's saying? People don't think about stuff like that. With his wives and children, the complement of the slaves group was always entirely casual, so that each group of slaves was composed of the representatives of various tribes. All right, so dodge that hijack. Furthermore, the Saramaccas of today are very kind-hearted people, friendly to the whites, which would not have been the case if their ancestors had been slaves, subjected to the bestial cruelty of the planters. So I am inclined to believe that the Saramaccas are the last aboriginal Negro tribe preserved in America. So now he's like talking, now he's like being logical. He's like, hey man, everything's pointing that they are aboriginal, all right? The Saramaccas. Okay, you guys see the pictures? All right, this is a Saramacca tribe. Of course, they're gonna put African in these pictures. All right, Saramacca people right here, Suriname. You guys take a good look. All right, this is what is in South America. Get a clear perspective. These are not Africans. They can't prove these people are from Africa. Do you understand? They cannot prove these people are from Africa. So I am inclined to believe that the Saramaccas are the last aboriginal Negro tribe preserved in America. You've been here. Continuing in the book. According to some Central American monuments, it seems that the continent of the New World in a remote epoch was much more extensive in its eastern part. This is what I've been telling you. Yes, a lot of it did go down. A lot of land, so-called Atlantis, a big part of it. But not all of it did. But that a series of terrific cataclysms destroyed a large area of the mainland. The Breton legends tells us that millennia ago, Brittany stretched farther, and the Welsh possess a legend concerning 3 terrific catastrophes which destroyed a great island in the ocean. I want to read this part. It says, it is well known that the sacrifices to the main Atlantean deity Poseidon consisted of horses. All right, consisted of horses. Now I want to ask you, where did horses originate? Again, if you haven't checked out the video yet, make sure to check out my Ancient Animals of America videos. I have one specifically on the origin of horses. It was actually here in America. Camels, lions, mammals, carnivores, elephants, all that was coming out of America before they went over to that side of the world somehow. But horses, all right? Big one right here, because they're telling you, literally, they just admitted right here. There's another one right here. Major drop. Consisted of horses. In the ancient world, we're talking about Americas because that's where they originated. They found horses all over the place here. Bones of horses, all types. They'll tell you, yeah, prehistoric. So when we talk about prehistory, right? Atlanteans, prehistory, then we're talking about the Americas. Because that's what the Atlanteans did when they supposedly sacrificed anything to Poseidon. It was consisted of horses. Horses originated here. We're talking about prehistory. That's America right here. And the ancient images of this god represent him as driving 6 horses. Again, prehistory, horses originated in America. Also, the goddess Cybele, whose cult was considerable in prehistoric times, was sometimes represented as a horse. And you know what? I never really thought of that when I was seeing all these images of the ancient gods of Greece and the Atlanteans riding horses. The Greeks didn't know nothing about that and all that. The horses were over here in prehistory. It is interesting to note in this connection that there is roughly made stone horse head in the Breton village Kervedal, which itself is situated near Cape Penmark. This latter name signifies in Breton a horse head. Continuing, it says here, the oldest Egyptian papyrus, the so-called Book of the Dead, places the abode of the beatified souls also in the far west, all right, in the far west, not West Africa, farther than West Africa. The far west, the Westerners, right? Thoth, Osiris, and all these people. They came from Atlantis, so-called Atlantis, America. Remember Osiris? We just got the video on corn. Osiris is a corn deity. Osiris is corn, nourishment. In a certain mysterious land of Amenti, yes, that was here. The land of Amenti was here, which formed a part of the kingdom of Osiris. All right, it says Pausanias. That exact and scrupulous writer mentions a group of islands in the Atlantic Ocean, probably the present Caribbean group, which he calls the Satirides. The same writer describes also the adventures of a certain Carian, Timus, who was obliged by a storm to land there and was met by some red-skinned people who wore long hair similar to a horse's mane. Pausanias did not explain how Timus returned home and why his discovery did not give some practical results. According to Strabon, many daring seafarers of his time ventured to go far westwards. Plutarch, in his biography of the Roman general Sertorius, says that the latter, in fleeing from the tyranny of Sulla, came to southern Spain and met there some pirates who had returned from some islands situated about 1,000 miles from Spain. That's definitely Americas, okay? These adventurers so much exalted the climate, the fertility, and the beauty of these islands. All right, it was like, wow, it was so beautiful. The climate was perfect. It was so much there to eat. The fertility, the ground is so fertile. The beauty is so beautiful there that Sertorius decided to make them his refuge. But his companions declined to accompany him, and he remained in Spain. These islands, doubtless the Canary archipelago, were called by the Greeks blessed and by the Romans happy. Horace writes, the ocean which surrounds the earth calls us. We direct ourselves to the blessed fields of the happy islands, where every year the soil of Ceres, remember Ceres is a corn deity, it was the same as corn mother, gives the crop, all right, they're talking about corn, without being cultivated. Pliny says that these happy islands are situated 750 miles west from Hades, the present Cadiz, okay? That's definitely America. And that the Numidian king Uba of Mauritania visited these islands and intended to develop there the production of purple dye. Besides the detailed description of Plato, we find mention of Atlantis in the works of Diodorus of Sicily, Pliny, Strabon, Timagenes, Homer, Aelian, Cosma Indicopletus, Proclus, Posidonius, Plutarch, Arnobius, and Pomponius Mela. It is proved that the ancient nations of the Mediterranean basin were aware of the existence of a certain mainland beyond the ocean, but sometimes it is difficult to establish exactly whether these notions concern Atlantis or America. It is the same thing. Remember what the Masons told us in their Masonic book, that Atlantis is America. However, in many cases, we can be quite sure that a given text concerns the New World. They are talking about America. The Greeks were talking about America. Certainly, the Phoenicians were in commercial relations with some American nations. Now, remember, that's the hijack. When we talk about the true old world, when we talk about the true promised land, Canaan, where Phoenicians came out of, right, supposedly, that's America. Phoenicians came out of here. They've seen it in reverse. Of course, they were here. And of course, they got proof. That's why they always talk about it. It says, relying upon the Phoenicians' accounts allude to America. Plato, for instance, relates in his dialogues that beyond the Pillars of Hercules exist some archipelagos, beyond them a vast continent, and beyond that a great sea. It is clear that Plato must have been aware of the existence of America and the Pacific Ocean. Yes, when he said the Great Sea, that was the Pacific. There is no doubt that he received this information either from the Phoenicians or from the Egyptians. These latter, with their very ancient traditions, could know about America and the Pacific Ocean from the inhabitants of lost Atlantis. Moreover, as the reader will see later on, the hypothesis of the American origin of the Egyptians, again, the hypothesis of the American origin of the Egyptians themselves is supported by certain archaeologists. What we've been telling you, who are the ancient Egyptians really? Where is ancient Egypt? Canary, it was here in America. All right? Again, more corroboration, another source letting you know it's not mine. Ideas, it's telling you right here of the American origin of the Egyptians. Europeans were not only bold or shipwrecked seafarers who in antiquity found occasionally the opposite American shores. We have at our disposal one account which even proves the inverse. Example, the accidental arrival in Europe of inhabitants of the New World. They're talking about American Indians going to Europe. Remember, we just got our seafaring, ancient seafarers of America videos, a couple of them that we did. You know, we know that we had ships here just like the Phoenicians, you know, big ships carrying 150 people, 200 people, you know, transporting merchandise all over the place, all kinds of merchandise they found in these ships. So they're saying they have another account here of Indians going over there. Now let's read what it says. It says Pomponius Mela in his Chronographia, Volume 3, 5, number 8, which is the oldest preserved geographical treatise, and Pliny, Historia Naturalis, Volume 2, 67, both tell us that in 62 BC, a boat full of red-skinned people of unknown origin was thrown up by the sea waves on the German coast. The king of the Suevians gave some of these men as slaves to Metellus Celerus, the Roman proconsul of Gaul. All right, these Edomites. This occurred soon after the conquest of Gaul, and the contemporaries such as Pliny and Pomponius Mela supposed that at that epoch that the Caspian Sea had a communication through the polar ocean with the Baltic Sea. Therefore, the arrival of Indians on the German coast was explained by the fact that they had made the tour around northern Europe coming from Asia. But later on it was concluded, Gomara, right, in his Historia Generalis de las Indias from 1553, that these newcomers in Germany had been Indians from Labrador. Indians from Labrador. You guys understand this is in BC times. American Indians being recorded going over there, and Gomara, a Spaniard, right, who came, Sephardic Jew Moorish, yeah, who came, one of the conquistador priests or whatever, he came and wrote in 1553 that those accounts that he had read from ancient Greeks were of Indians from Labrador, Newfoundland. I told you Newfoundland, going over there to the British Isles and to Europe, that was very common. The French King Charles X bought once for the Louvre an ancient bronze bust of one of those Indians of 62 BC from a certain Edmond Durand. The authenticity of this artistic bust is beyond doubt, and its Roman origin was established by the archaeologist Egger. It is contemporary bronze effigy of one of the mysterious newcomers to Germany of 62 BC. It represents the head of a slave with very large and outstanding ears and a sloping forehead, What does this have to do with the coat of arms, right? And the so-called slave heads that supposedly they were slaves, The skull is dolichocephalic, the superciliary arches being very prominent. The lips are thick and the eagle nose resembles perfectly an Indian one. In fact, it is nothing else but the head of an Indian. The head of an Indian. Continuing, it says here the Brazilian philologist E. Onfroy de Toron even supposes that the Atlanteans invaded Europe together with the South American Andes, now the Quichua tribe, which inhabits the Andean region. They're just calling him the Andes. They're saying, oh, they went over there with the Quichua. No, what if that is the Atlanteans that went over there and waged war with the Athenians? And that's where you get the story of Plato, right? Athenians trying to fight the Atlanteans. However, while such migrations and invasions of the American tribes were probably possible during the existence of Atlantis by 1300 BC, the continent bridge between Europe and America had already disappeared, all right? So he's going off people walking like we didn't have ships, like we couldn't navigate over there, right? So dodge the hijack with that part. The same gentleman believes that the study of South American languages, all right, we're going to get into this in future videos, the philology, the history of languages. We're going to see how many of the world languages are actually connected to many of the American languages. So he's saying the study of South American languages might give a key to the whole problem of Atlantis. He analyzes, for instance, the word Atlantis and finds that in Quichua and in Old Egyptian, it would signify the land of high valleys. The word Anti means in Old Egyptian highly situated valley. According to Plato, the mountains of the sunken continent possess many valleys which were situated high above sea level. A part of the Andean ridge in Quichua is still called Anti, and its population are Antis. Doubtless our geographical term Andes derives from the Quichua Anti. So you guys, that's a big one. So again, in Egyptian, right, the word Anti, as it says here, means highly situated valley, right? Anti, Andi, Anti, again, Andes, that's where you get Andes from. That's the same place. Derives from the Quichua Anti. The word Atlas, according to H.O. de Horon, is composed of two words of the Old Egyptian ATL. Now they gave an ATL to Egypt. All right, come on now. What we talking about? America, Mississippi, Tennessee, Illinois. What we talking about here? Missouri. What we talking about? Mound Valley, Mound Cities, and as which belongs to Old Egyptian and to Quichua. Quichua. This latter language is used as in order to designate the property of, or to express the idea of permanence, but we can analyze the word Atlas also in another way. Continuing in the book, The Shadow of Atlantis. In this part, pay close attention to what they're going to say here. It says the Atlantean capital, the magnificent Poseidonis, is described in detail by the Greek sage. But I feel that the author is somewhat inclined to myth and fancy. For instance, I cannot easily trust Plato's account of many statues of pure gold, Orichalcos roofs, etc. However, listen to this. This description of Poseidonis hardly resembles the account of Cortes to the king of Spain concerning the old Mexican Tenochtitlan, now Mexico City. All right, you heard what he said? They're saying it's hard to believe Plato's description because it's just so fanciful, right? But when you actually read the first-hand account of Cortes, primary source, when you read how he described Tenochtitlan, it actually resembles a lot how Plato was describing the capital of Atlantis. It is probable that the founders of Tenochtitlan, Enoch, right? Enoch, you see the word Enoch and Tenochtitlan, right? The Toltecs or Aztecs, when building their new capital, imitated the old one in Atlantis. Now see how the hijack? Starts the hijack. They're saying, oh, they imitated their old capital. No, that is the capital. Where did Thoth tell you he was coming from? A city in a lake surrounded by two volcanoes, just like Tenochtitlan was in a lake and it was surrounded by two volcanoes. We're just talking about the capital, not the whole of Atlantis, the capital. Many interior citadels with large central squares from which radiated streets crossed by a multitude of canals. All these existed in Tenochtitlan as well as in Poseidonis, all right? Plato was describing Tenochtitlan the whole time when he was describing Poseidonis. The numerous dams across those canals served for interior communication and helped in the defense of the town during wartime. Again, make sure to go back if you want to read the whole chapter. We just went through some parts here. There's actually better chapters coming. That's why I want to actually get to them quicker. But a lot of good info that I went over here that I didn't read. Make sure to go back and get it yourself. All right, before we go, I just want to go over this information again, in case you never heard it before. This is actually the book New Atlantis. All right, this was supposedly written by Francis Bacon in 1660. All right, 1660. I just want to remind everybody what he said. So on page 2 of this book, he's talking about an island, of a story of these people that went from Peru to China. It says here, the next day's conference relates how that, though they lived remote and unknown to all other nations, yet they had knowledge of that languages, books, and affairs of those that lie at the farthest distance. How the great Atlantis, all right, which we call America, again, how the great Atlantis, which we call America, Atlantis, abounded once in tall ships. Again, Atlantis, which we call America, is the same place. All right, another quick reminder from the book, Ancient Mystic Oriental Masonry. And it says here, and secondly, with the consequent wrecking of the continent of America, when the globe became involved in the consequences of the disorder of the skies, America, known to the mystics as Atlantis, all right, known to the mystics as Atlantis, America, another book telling you America, known to the mystics as Atlantis, was the seat of the greatest empire that has ever existed. The Masons know. All right, so we're gonna get into this book real quick here. I've read from it before a lot of times. It says here, Civilization and the Ancient Egyptians by Katanga Abongo. And she's from Africa. She's gonna let you know who was first and who civilized Africa. We go right to the introduction of the book. And she says, the idea that it was Europeans who introduced civilization to Africa is one of the biggest historical myths. In fact, evidence from archaeology, oral history, traditional languages, and cultural practices strongly indicate that it was the South American Indians who introduced civilization to Africa. Okay, some 7,000 years ago. Who? South American Indians, people from America, so-called Atlantis, right? She's letting you know, and she's from Africa. Who civilized who? Who brought corn over there? We're gonna see. Who brought corn over there to help them get civilized? South American Indians. 7,000 years ago, long before the Greek and Roman civilizations emerged, the South American Indians had introduced civilization to Africa, thereby making Africa the second continent in the world to become civilized. Spurred on by their South American Indian guests, the Africans built great empires that lasted for several thousand years at a time. Why? They were spurred on by their South American Indian guests. We taught them. We brought them corn and everything. The strong cultural similarities between Africa and South America have largely been ignored. The similarities between native South American agriculture and African agriculture have largely been ignored. These are all American plants. Remember, the similarities between some African cultural practices and some native South American cultural practices have been ignored. The similarities between the native South American architecture and traditional architecture in some parts of Africa have been ignored. The similarities between native South American names and African names have been ignored. The fact that pyramids exist only in South America, Africa, and the Middle East has been ignored. Even a recent discovery of ancient South American Indian cave paintings depicting Negroes has been ignored. The lack of interest in this evidence may be the result of the fact that Westerners are afraid to confront the possibility that there were South American Indians in North Africa at the time that the pyramids were built. Okay? Oh, big one right there. So we're going to belly flop a little bit to chapter 1. It says here, the South American continent and the evolution of civilization. One of history's biggest myths is that civilization started in the Middle East. European historians made this claim and have perpetrated this myth for well over a century. On the contrary, African oral history, listen, because a lot of Pan-Africans think they know the history and they don't even know any Africans. They don't ask the local people what's their traditions. It says African oral history and archaeological evidence suggests that civilization began in South America. Again, civilization began in South America. All right. Continuing, it says the advent of agriculture made it possible for the early South Americans to live in one place for prolonged periods of time. The constant interaction between humans living in large groups in the same place for prolonged periods of time eventually led to the evolution of technology. It is difficult to estimate the time frame in which primitive technology in South America began. It is also not certain how it began. However, about 10,000 years ago, the native South Americans began evolving an amazing technological base. Before long, they had started building an advanced civilization. Now, remember, this is around the same time they're saying they developed maize, right? 10,000 years ago. Before long, they had started building an advanced civilization. The ancient South Americans were incredibly ingenious. About 8,000 years ago, they had built an advanced civilization from scratch. Archaeological evidence indicates that the center of this great civilization was in present-day Peru. Perhaps the most important invention of the ancient South Americans was clothing. It was the ancient South Americans who invented cotton-based clothing as we know it today, okay? It was from here. They also invented the loom. Cotton is a South American crop, all right? Cotton. It was the ancient South Americans who figured out an ingenious way to transform cotton into clothing. Cotton-based clothing quickly replaced animal skins as the main form of clothing. The great civilization that the ancient South Americans built is best known for pyramids. Pyramid technology is a native South American invention, okay? It was invented here, it was from here. And it was probably the greatest invention. It's not from Africa. The oldest pyramids are right here in Caral Super, Peru. The South American Indians are the only people who ever built pyramids at the height of their civilization. All right, so just wanted to go ahead and get into this book real quick so you guys can see. They're also letting you know, even people from Africa letting you know. All right, so, we know the true old world is here in America. We know Atlantis is America, all the civilizations, all that. We know maize is a native plant of America. And we just read that Africa, these West Africans, a lot of these people go back to America and that they were civilized by South American Indians. Now look at this article right here. We're in the Current Anthropology magazine or journal, volume 12, number 3 from June 1971. Here you can see the pages. This is from the University of Chicago on behalf of Wenner Grant Foundation for Anthropological Research, all right? Maize and the Mande Myth by M.D.W. Jeffries. Yes, maize and the Mande Myth. And the Mande from Africa? How do they have maize if maize is a native plant of America? All right, it says here, the Mande, or Mali, or Mele, or Mandingo, a people occupying what has been called the buckle of the Niger, have a beautiful and complex creation myth that includes the appearance of maize and its eastward migration with them down the Niger to Lake Debo. All right? So yeah, coming from America, eastward migration. When you're traveling eastward from America, you end up in Africa, right? So maize, what does that tell you? That somebody from America went over there, right? The occurrence of the myth in groups now widely scattered in the Sudan suggests great antiquity, and where migrations can be dated a time long before the discovery of America is implied. So that last caller, we were reading her book, she was right. Oral tradition, African oral tradition states that in antiquity, they were visited by Americans, or they are the Americans. They came from America, most likely a lot of those tribes. This implication casts doubt on the traditional view that maize was introduced into Africa by the Portuguese after they had obtained it from the New World, all right? We know already that that's false. We know corn was all over the ancient world, all over the place, and it was, again, coming out of America, though, because we are the true old world. This paper is a review of the evidence for the presence of maize in West Africa before the time of Columbus. Maize, all right, maize is from America. It begins with a discussion of the Mande myth and of the various tribal traditions that support its view as to the antiquity of maize in the region. Next, it presents as supporting evidence the various names for maize among the West African people other than Mande, and some inferences from botany of considerable antiquity for the West African form of maize. All right, so this is a great article if you want to get into it. You can find it on JSTOR. You can download it for 14 bucks or read it online. All right, so again, we go back all the way to the first book we read today. Again, The Shadow of Atlantis by Colin A. Bragging. America, right? Look what they found in El Salvador. Look what they found in El Salvador, right? Osiris and Isis. This is the true old world. Yes, we did civilize Europe and Africa and so-called Asia. North America was so-called Asia. It's India superior. America, the shadow of Atlantis.